Welcome to the Breakthrough Advisor Podcast. In this podcast, we inspire advisors with ideas and pathways to break through barriers and build a thriving retirement income business. We will interview innovative technology developers, business leaders, and successful advisors, then help you organize and execute these ideas to move your business forward.
Hey folks, this is Jack Martin. I'm the virtual CMO for Simplicity InsurMark. I want to welcome you to the Breakthrough Advisor Podcast. Today we've got Dave Duley coming to us from PlanGap, and he's going to explain all of that, what that is and why you should know that if you don't already. But our subject today is Social Security, and when we scheduled this podcast, David and I were just talking, I wanted to talk about Social Security policy and how it impacts your clients and what you can do to help, navigate the anxiety, that comes with hearing the Social Security is going to go bankrupt. And so we thought that would be a really target-rich environment for you. But lo and behold, Joe Biden wakes up from a nap and says, hey, I'm going to sign the Social Security Fairness Act, okay? And so we can all debate whether it's really fair or what that word really means, another time. But it has consequence because it's signed, it's law, it has impact to you and your clients. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Hey, David, welcome to the Breakthrough Advisor Podcast. Thank you for joining us, from whatever foreign locale you're located in today.
Well, thank you. It's I understand there's some snow happening in the States, but I don't know if it's ever snowed where I'm at right here. So if it does, things have gone really bad.
Really bad. That puts a whole
Like
new spin
Hollywood
on
movie
global
bad.
warming.
Yeah. But it's great to be here with you, and it's very timely.
Oh, thank you very much. So for the 4 or 5 people who are listening who don't know who you are and what PlanGap is, catch us up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, my name's David Duley. I'm CEO and founder of PlanGap, and we started our company about 6 years ago with the idea of helping Americans plan their retirement so it's not subject to political football. And our first entree into that was to help co-develop with North American and Annexus the first annuity that pays an enhancement should the rules on Social Security change that will negatively impact your retirement. Now, ironically, they just recently changed a few days ago. So it's a very fertile ground for us to talk about. And for about 2.1 million Americans, the Social Security Fairness Act will enhance their benefits at a time where just a few short years ago, the trust fund started bleeding down towards insolvency. And so it's a weird time to really have this conversation as the clock is ticking closer and closer to, as you mentioned, the fear around, is Social Security going to be there for me? And what are they going to do to fix it?
Yeah, it's really a puzzlement to me. I mean, so it impacts public employees and surviving spouses, right?
Yeah, the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset.
Exactly. And so that impacts folks that you would think of who are employees now or may have been employees in the past or may be employees in the future. We were talking with Mary Beth Franklin recently about this, and she made a good point about folks who are in the military where this Social Security thing isn't an issue for them, but when they retire and then go to work, let's say for the state of Texas or the state of Georgia, now they've got a Social Security bogey in their portfolio that they need to think about, right?
Yeah, and there's another way to look at it too. Kind of imagine a police officer, right? He worked 20 years as a police officer, didn't pay into the system, but has a nice pension, or let's just say he worked 30 years as a police officer, but did a side job as a security officer, and then that income was taxed. And so if they had sort of that 40 quarters of paying into the system, and then what happened was, due to the windfall elimination provision, some of that calculation of their benefit was reduced because they were also receiving a government pension. And so, depending on the calculation, it could reduce someone's Social Security benefits up to, don't quote me on the exact number, but I think it's like $537 a month. penalty um, based on how the average indexed earnings are calculated. You know.
Yeah, the numbers that are getting tossed around by politicians, have to be air quotes. Okay, and
Yeah,
so I think I
that's
think
true.
I think Biden said the average person is going to get $360, and I'm going, oh great, here we go. So I mean, someone's got to pay for that, right? I
Well,
mean,
yeah.
and so we've been having this ongoing conversation about the actuarial report in 2035 and that cliff, and now along comes this fairness thing. Some folks are pegging it $180 billion cost over the next decade. Which has got to come from somewhere, right?
Yeah, one of the core missions of our company is to see the world as it is, no better, no worse, right? You kind of can see spins on both sides of the political aisle or through media on what is true. But if we agree on some basic principles that eventually making money out of thin air will have its consequence. I think we live through that with this higher inflation environment that we've been in, that you can't inject a ton of money into the system without some sort of inflationary consequence, that the rules of nature and finance eventually pan out. And so, to your point, what has been defined as the consequence of this new Social Security Fairness Act is that for everyone else, the trust fund is going to run out of money earlier. And not only is it going to run out of money earlier, the benefit cut, if that should come to pass, will be greater for the rest of Americans because it's just math, right? And so there used to be a time, in fact, there was a time when I started this company 6 years ago that I thought those at and near retirement had a low probability of their Social Security benefits being cut by the fix that a government will actually have to do one day, right? And the fix will come in two forms: reducing benefits or increasing taxes, right? Those are the levers the government can pull. In extending retirement age is effectively reducing benefits, right? If you extend it, you pull it away from a short amount of time, or a combination of both. And what has really enlightened a lot of advisors and their clients is, yeah, if the vote was held today to fix Social Security, baby boomers probably wouldn't be affected that much because they're kind of in charge, right, of the House and Senate. Just the demographic of that populace is still a heavily voting block of individuals. But let's forecast 10 years out, right, where this new specter is. The baby boomer generation will only represent 18 to 20% of the entire electorate at that time. And then you have the younger generations who already don't think Social Security is going to be there for them. And it's a scam, right? It's an additional tax. And so the the think tanks are now saying, wow, when those people are in charge, they're going to make sure the boomers take their fair share, in that any reform will involve benefit cuts to the wealthy, right? Remember, but what's fascinating is we have an indication of what we think the government believes the wealthy is, and all we have to do is look into COVID stimulus. If you remember COVID stimulus, if you had $75,000 or more of income, you got means tested out of Social Security, or excuse me, out of COVID stimulus checks. Government had all that information readily available to them. Same thing could easily happen with Social Security. And so those that have done the right thing, saved, have income in retirement, could easily be in the crosshairs of reform 10 years out.
I think there's a nuance there that a lot of advisors may be glossing over when they read the news story about the Fairness Act and public employees, and that is that this has a consequence to all of their clients.
Right.
From the perspective that this whole conversation about funded and the cliff now superheats, right? And so the aspect of it that you're talking about with the electorate is really an interesting facet to that, and I think the opportunity here for advisors is to engage not only those who are pre-retirement, but also those who are in retirement in conversations about what if.
Yeah, you're touching on something that what we've seen advisors that are really successful about what we'll call the Social Security protection story is a lot of advisors have used Social Security in their practice to drive engagement. And that has been primarily through optimization, when to elect, when to have a spouse elect, and when to kind of use the math around that. And the math is simple, right? If you know when you're going to die, right? That's always kind of the saying. If you know exactly when you're going to die, it's easy. It's math. We can know exactly when to claim. Now, a lot of advisors have large lists or their leads that they help people, make those claiming decisions. What we've seen is advisors going back to their clients and say, now you've made those claiming decisions. How do we protect that income stream? Because for most American households, Social Security is going to yield $1.5 million, $2 million of lifetime income, based on average longevity rates. And so with our products and products available to you guys, you're able to almost buy a little bit of an insurance policy or a hedge, ability to get an acceleration of benefit on an annuity to help bridge some of that gap for a period of time. And so, you get back to the name of our company, PlanGap. How do we sort of provide tools to advisors and their clients to address the elephant in the room and have another arrow in their quiver to say, yeah, I know our clients are worried about what's happening with Social Security. Can we put them into some strategies that help mitigate that should that option present itself in the future?
So the market has expanded for the conversation about Social Security planning, and the subject matter has expanded. Optimization, yes, that's still a conversation. That gives you a starting point, let's say. But then you've got to figure out, how am I going to protect that? And the idea of circling back to, those who are retired and those pre-retirees, and now having that conversation about Social Security protection, and really in a bigger sense, income protection, right? And so, it really feeds into the whole lifetime income conversation, in a slightly different way, right?
Well, Social Security is the largest lifetime income vehicle ever existed on planet Earth.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
Just the natural layup it is for advisors to have a protection conversation around that. And some clients, they're kind of dismissive of it. They'll say, "Oh, I wasn't counting on it, or it's only $3,000 or $4,000 a month, or whatever." But when you look at longevity, you're like, "Yeah, but that's 300 to $500,000 out of your pocket, man." And usually people kind of perk up then, and they're like, "Well, that's a boat." That's a really nice boat. That I kind of want a boat in my retirement. And so, um, and I think we have to, again, seeing the world as it is, say, okay, when there is reform, who are they coming after for reform first? What's going to be politically acceptable? And it's going to be those with means. It's going to be those that have done the right thing. And so, in the top 20, 25% of Americans, that's kind of around where COVID stimulus means testing ended up. And if so, chances are you'll be part of the fix by getting less benefits.
So for the advisors that you've been working with who have fully embraced the PlanGap product,
Yeah.
what kinds of things have they been doing that have produced a lot of success? What's working for them?
Yeah. Very simple. In fact, the North American website has a tool that allows you to see you and your client's lifetime value of Social Security in what the stated 23% cut in benefits could mean. And so all of a sudden, you have a very simple illustration that says, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, your household's supposed to get $1.5 million of Social Security benefits over your expected life. A 25% cut of that is, $375,000. I can show you strategies to help offset that if something happens. Is there anything, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, that you own that's worth $1.5 million that you wouldn't put some type of insurance on?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the conversation. And then people are like, well, yeah, I mean, of course, I want to help insulate that. And what's neat about the North American product is it has multiple protections in it. It has the use of an acceleration for two of six activities of daily living. And so if you need that benefit, it's there. It has an enhanced death benefit as well as some longevity protection in that. So whether or not you're affected by Social Security reform or not, it's a really great product to help address those risks in retirement that are so prevalent in people's minds.
Is there any difference in the way we approach this, whether it's IRA, let's say, and non-qualifying money?
No, although I think a lot of the sales have been through qualified, movement of assets, but the story is still the same. The issue is still the same on will you be potentially targeted for Social Security cuts? And if so, how do we again not have our retirement income plan subject to political football? People kind of want to be left alone, right? They don't want to get on the internet or on Facebook, God forbid, or anywhere else to get ginned up about who says this and who might take my Social Security away and who I should vote for. Wouldn't it be great if you were as immune to that as you could become? And that's really the goal of our company, the different products and features that we help design with big insurance carriers and distribution, like a Nexus, helped us with this, um, and um, and really moved up the ball down the field about what we know the client is worried about.
So, have you guys thought yet about how to best go to market with the public employees on this?
Well, the public employees got a big raise. I mean, yeah, right, right, right. So I think a great conversation is for advisors that have clients where this legislation affected them. It is a perfect conversation to say, hey, maybe we don't want to spend all this money all at once. Like maybe we shouldn't count on this being there the rest of your life. Let's talk about the insolvency date. Let's talk the fact that there's no free lunch here. Like you were one of the 2.1 or 2.7 million, I can't remember which number, one of those numbers, of people that got into Social Security payment enhancement, but the money didn't come from thin air. So because of that, the trust funds being drawn down faster, which means a reduction could happen sooner in your retirement plan. So we need to have that conversation to say, do we take this extra money and act like it's not there and use it to stash away for the future? Can we fund and move assets around to say, wow, I would like some sort of Social Security protection feature in my retirement plan in case something happens? Because I know, I have a sense that there will be a day where we can't just print money out of thin air without consequences. um, and I think a very real life indication of consequences is the fact that the Federal Reserve, as you know, has reduced the interest rate a couple times here recently. In the 30-year bond didn't really move. And the theory is it's because our financial house as America isn't necessarily in order. So the market dictates the risk rate, not the government. And so you see that maybe the long-term bonds aren't moving down in correlation to what the Federal Reserve wants because everyone knows America can't spend money forever.
Yeah, there's definitely still an inflation component, despite the
Yeah.
fact that, people are saying, inflation has slowed and so on, prices are still at a high level relative to the last, say, 5 years ago. But there's also this inflation component, once you get past the sugar high of, short-term rates coming down, still you got to pay the freight, right? The money's got to come from somewhere. And until something changes, You know, so what are you hearing about solutions or direction on resolving the cliff? There was a thing about taking the cap off FICA payments and so on,
Yep.
which seems to play right into the narrative of let's tax the rich, right? And
Right.
so if we take the cap off that, that impacts, my paycheck, but it also as a small business owner impacts my payroll because, now I've got, to pay that for other folks as well, my share, right?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, and we've studied that issue, there's all this talk about taking the cap off or creating a donut hole that between, like, I'll just use round numbers, between 200,000 and 400,000 of income, you don't pay that extra FICA tax, but then above 400,000 you pay it again, right? And so the reality is there's just not enough people making that kind of money to add true solvency into a $1.2 trillion annual system, right? That has a $50 trillion negative liability over the next, 30 or 40 years. There's just not enough people making that money. And so politically, it's easy to talk about, but there's just not enough people. And the biggest thing that we've seen is right now there's a formula, with bin points on your income and what you pay into the system and what you get out, and it progressively declines. So the more money you make, the less you get as far as a benefit back in your actual Social Security. If they remove the cap, no one's discussed what the new formula is. Does that mean Bill Gates gets a $1 million a month Social Security check eventually? If he has $100 million of income, it's easy to talk about, but we haven't seen the math to propose, okay, if I eliminate the cap, does that mean I also get a bigger benefit because I paid more money in? Or is this truly just another tax? Is this truly just another tax that I'm getting zero benefit from? And so we live in a world where it's easy to have sound bites, right? Rich need to pay their fair share, and we're going to hear more of that. And we're entering a period, I think we're in the first inning of the policy risk period. And this isn't an indictment of any political party, it's just math. We're in a period where tough decisions are going to have to be made. I personally love the Doge effort, right? Not as a political statement, but as a reality check, because I believe that they will go in and find government inefficiencies. They'll find the $3 million spent to see if a shrimp can run backwards on a treadmill, or whether or not squirrels fight more if they're juiced up on steroids. I think the answer is probably yes. You know, I they're gonna find government waste, but it's not gonna do anything to our debt and deficit because there's only four things that matter to that: Social Security, Medicare, the service of our national debt, and military. That's it. And so they'll find those things. But what's going to come to pass in about 18 months is a sober look in the mirror that no matter how lean we got, unless we attack one of those other four, we can't we we can't change the trajectory of our economic house.
Yeah. I mean, it's really majoring in the minors.
That's exactly right.
It's a problem worth solving.
It's a problem we're solving. We got to be good stewards. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. But by the same token, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's not the panacea.
No.
So, yeah.
And so we're going to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, I tried to lose weight, so I drank one less Coke a week and I lost a half a pound. And then eventually the doctor's going to be like, dude, it's going to take more than the one less Coke a week. It's going to take 50 push-ups and sit-ups a day plus walking 3 miles. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's going to be reality. And so if I'm a betting man, that those conversations, those policy risk conversations, are going to be part of the leading conversations in the next decade in financial planning.
Yeah, 100%. What do you and PlanGap have on the horizon? What can you tease us a little bit about what's coming in 25?
Yeah, we're expanding our product roadmap with some new products that will hit, and so I can't really talk about the details of that, but that should hit mid-year. That's going to broaden those arrows in the quiver that advisors can use to help address the elephant in the room of Social Security reductions. So we're excited about that, and then we're also working on a really neat technology that should be out in the next year that should help diagnose policy risks for individuals. So how do I know, as Jack Martin, how do I know what they're talking about in DC and what affects me and what doesn't? Like, wouldn't that be great to know? So I know what to pay attention to. That's part of the technology that we're working on that we're going to bring to market and your clients here shortly. So,
That sounds amazing. That sounds amazing.
yeah,
All right. Any parting nuggets of wisdom you want to drop to our listening audience?
really the peace of mind that comes with doing planning to limit government meddling in it is a worthwhile endeavor. And whether you use our product or not, of course, we're biased towards ours because it's the first one ever that pays an enhancement if the rules change negatively against you based on policy changes in Social Security. But kind of going eyes wide open, if you believe that there will be consequences to debt and deficit spending, if you believe those things, then let's be smart about it. And we have time to be smart about it. We have 7, 8, 9 years. I think we're going to get a sobering wake up here in the new year when the new report comes out. It's interesting. You started this conversation saying that the Social Security Trust Fund will end, or not, well, it will be depleted in 2035. And you're correct in what the government is saying, but it's our job to tell you the truth, right? And so what the government is saying is the combined trust fund, the retirement trust fund and the disability trust fund combined, extinguish in 2035. But by law, they can't be commingled. So if you read a little further, you find that the Social Security retirement income part actually reduces in 2033. That was of last year. That was before the passing of the Social Security Fairness Act. So my guess is we're going to see that number collapse even farther. And so that is, 2032, 2031. And we haven't even gotten into the political idea that was floated greatly during the presidential campaign of not taxing Social Security benefits and what that could mean to solvency, because that was a real conversation. And if that passes, now I mean the trust fund insolvency really hypes up. So this is a real issue. As I was preparing for this podcast today, it reminded me of a quote, and I'll read it to you. It's from 1770 by Alexander Fraser Tytler. It says a democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the voters discover they can vote themselves money, although he uses a different English word, from the public treasury. From that moment on, the majority always votes for the candidates promising the most benefits from the public treasury, with the result that a democracy always collapses over loose fiscal policy followed by dictatorship. The average age of the world's greatest civilizations has been 200 years. That was from 1770.
Well, he sounds like he's a skeptic. Okay, so
And he's wrong because it should have happened in 1970, right? No, we've been able to buy more time. So there's
yeah.
always ways to argue it. But, do chickens come home to roost? Can we violate the laws of nature and finance forever without consequences? Probably not.
So my DNA is financial advisor. So I've been a CFP, RI, et cetera, for 3 decades. And I'm trying to imagine having this conversation with my clients without their heads exploding, and without
Right.
them just, wanting to curl up in a ball,
Right.
And so it's almost too much. It's almost too much,
Well,
and I
we've
think
got time, though.
well, I understand that, okay, but that comes with a grain of salt. Okay, we
Yeah.
got time, but we got a bunch of morons in Washington D.C. And so immovable object, irresistible force. You know what I mean? So it's challenging. Hey, but okay, so before we wrap up, So what are a couple things that David does when he's not contemplating Social Security protection and deficits and debts that would surprise people about you?
I've got a few. One, I'm in the Caribbean right now on a dive trip, so I don't know if that's surprising, but I'll give you the most surprising thing about me because it was a surprise to me. Long story short, 6 years ago, I found out through a 23andMe test that I was donor conceived. I have 48 brothers and sisters so far, and there was a movie on ESPN made about us because our biological father was famous. So how about that for leaving as the next? Remember, because Eric, who put us together, alluded to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if you're entertained, your listeners want to see an entertaining, heartfelt story about my biological father, go to ESPN Plus and stream The Great Imposter and Me. And then you'll see yours truly in it again. My father was Barry Bremen, the guy that snuck in and posed as an athlete and like warmed up in the All-Star games and accepted an Emmy Award. He was America's prankster. And lo and behold, I found out, gosh, 6 years ago now, that that was my biological father through a donor conception thing because my father died when I was young.
In the last 3 or 4 years we've been doing this podcast, I have to say that's the winning answer.
Thank you. It's funny because when I go to parties or get invited to dinner, people are like, "Hey, tell your story," and I'm like, "I'll go last," because it just deflates everyone else's stories. It is a hell of a story.
Yep. Well, it must be a heck of a Thanksgiving with all those brothers and sisters.
Oh yeah, they're spread all out. Yeah, luckily we don't have to buy Christmas gifts. So
No doubt. Hey, thank you very much for taking time out of your vacation schedule to join us. I really appreciate it. And I know our
my
audience
pleasure, and
does.
this has been great.
It really has been. Hey, folks, thank you very much for joining us today on the Breakthrough Advisor podcast. If you'll go to the InsurMark.net website, and you can get into a lot of content where we talk about Social Security planning and so on, and we talk about Social Security protection and all of that. And you'll find, lots of blog posts and lots of content that'll help you with that. So visit the site, check it out. And David, I think you're coming back in the next month or two to do if there's a more academic way to attack this, I think that's the way we're going to go. So it'd be extremely practical, folks. Hey, thank you very much, David. Have a great day.
My pleasure. See you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Breakthrough Advisor podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of InsurMark. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only.